Hey Vinny, hurry up! We got krauts to kill! Hey, easy there, Tony. When nature calls, it calls, huh? Bozo. Oh! 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 Mamma mia, my calzones. You there! Up, soldier! There is killing to be done! Oh, yeah, Sarge, I'm up. Sergeant? I am a commissar, damn you! Wait, what's the Ruski doing here? I am a commissar of the Imperial Guard trained in the Scalaris. You will address me as such, guardsmen. Yeah, definitely a commie. Close enough. Now quickly, these blasted heretics keep on destroying our armor before we can reach the front lines. We need to figure out a way to fix it. Oh, hey, just make it a jumbo, huh? A what? A jumbo. You know, throw in extra armor and whatnot. Capiche? Your solution to this problem is to simply add more plasteel plate. Yeah. Brilliant, guardsman! Such ingenuity is becoming of a true servant of the Imperium. Tech priest, get the sacred welding implement! There is work to be done! Huh. He's just as mouthy as such, though.
I did not expect that. Or did I?
Holy shit! Un gigante calmar! Salutations, Rangers. General Bradley 101 back at you again with another History Hammer. Yes, indeedy, ladies and gentlemen, we take a look at the wacky world of Warhammer 40k and its IRL historical counterpart and see how in the world did our real-life history give birth to this beautiful monstrosity of fantasy sci-fi conglomeration that is Warhammer 40,000. And in today's video, we're taking a look at the mainstays of both eras, the Sherman tank and the Leman Russ tank. We're gonna take a look at how these two behemoths of steel are very much similar, yet in some cases very much different. So in the end, we can find out if the Leman Russ tank is essentially a World War II box of steel. Spoiler, it is. But before we get into today's video, make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that wonderful YouTube stuff. Check out the merch if you want some awesome channel memes. Check out the Patreon, our memberships if you want to join up. You get some awesome rewards and I will give you a big old kiss. Mwah. Join the Discord, it's bumping, baby. As well as if you need any VA work, I am a VA, so hit me up down below. But without any further ado, let's get cracking on in today's video with their histories. Rightio, as always, we will start off with the history. So, the Leman Russ. The Leman Russ was called the Leman Russ because it was founded by the 6th Legion on the world of Nora Balius. Nora Balius was a segmentum of human space that had been previously inhabited by the interstellar human empire. However, during the Dark Age technology and the fall of said empire, it was taken over by the Norman. Now these were evil aliens who had enslaved a portion of humanity and used them as slaves, surprising absolutely no one. Now, the Space Wolves rocked up and they absolutely broke everything in between. And afterwards, while they were drinking and partying, one of them drunken comrades stumbled across an STC of a tank. The Mechanicus, in honor of this, decreed that it would be named the Leman Russ. And lo and behold, the metal box was born. The Leman Russ quickly became the mainstay of the Imperial Army at the time, because it was cheap, it was reliable, and contrary to popular belief, it was pretty good at what it did. Now in 40k, you'll notice that the Guard gets shit on a lot. They have the worst guns, the worst tech, the worst everything. People generally assume that the Guard is the worst faction, and it's a meme of, hey, they just throw copious amounts of people at you. This is half true. What do I mean by half true? Because half the Imperium does indeed operate like that. The other half, however, operates very, very, very effectively. What you need to understand is that what the Leman Russ is versus what it's supposed to be are not the same thing. Not to mention, how it's supposed to be used versus how it actually is used, again, is not the same thing. And the people using it versus the people who are supposed to use it, you guessed it, are not the same thing.
One of these things is not like the others.
That's the beauty of 40k. It's open-endedness. So we see that Leman Russ was created to be the mainline battle tank, and it was created as actually really sophisticated. It had many different variants, and depending on where it was formed and who used it, it could be utterly devastating. A prime example is the Solar Auxilia, who used the solar pattern, which was essentially a better version of the Leman Russ in every single form. Better armor, faster, better gun, more advanced tech, protection against all forms of radiological and chemicalogical weapons. It was just perfect. And then in some cases we have my favorite Leman Russ variant, the Incinerator, which is a Volkite gun. Look at that. It's so good. Oh, it's so good. I love it. Compare that to some Leman Russes who were quite literally made by a semi-industrialized world that quite literally has the same tech level as World War II. It was quite rubbish. Planetary defense forces using it? Equal rubbish. Elite guard that are respected by space marines? Quality. It really does depend. And the history of the Russ kind of ends there. It served admirably throughout the entirety of the Great Crusade and well into 40k. The Russ is the Russ. It's been around forever and it's one of the most iconic vehicles of 40k. There's not really much to get into the nitty gritty of it. Depending on where you are, it's made differently and built differently. Although the two main patterns are the Mars Alpha pattern and the Riser pattern. The differences between the two, practically none. According to the specs, don't really know. Now, let's compare that to the good old Sherman boy. Now, the Sherman, unlike the Russ, has a long bit of development history we can talk into. So, the origins of the Sherman do not lie with a giant group of ultra-drunk, ultra-violent Viking cosplayers rolling up to an enslaved population, liberating them, and then drunkenly rummaging around while they were pillaging and finding this cool piece of tech. Sadly, it was instead created by Ford Motor Company.
Have you ever been beaten by a wet spaghetti noodle by your girlfriend because she has a twin sister and you got confused and fucked her dad? Well, that's how it feels to drive a Ford F-250.
Though, asterisks, it wasn't just one company that made all variants of the Sherman. I think there was like 12 or 13 at the time, ranging from various different, but Ford was the first. And its origins actually found in another tank, the M3 Lee. Now, the M3 Lee, or Grant, depending on which side of the pond you reside, was also known as a Franken tank. It was essentially a stopgap, because they needed something that was better than the current tanks that they had, which were quite useless, to be frank.
This is worthless.
It's less than worthless, my boy.
And something that could get them along until the proper tank, the Sherman, was introduced. The Sherman was manufactured in 1942 and saw combat in 1943, though it is possible that they could have saw some combat in late 1942, but no accounts, no records, so we're not really going to go with that. The Sherman's production run ran all the way from 1942 all the way to 1957, with a grand total of over 50,000 being developed and produced, with countless variations both standardized and specialized. And while the US Army retired it in 1957, it would go on serving in some militaries all the way up to 2018. Now say what you will about the Sherman, but that's gotta be a pretty good piece of gear to still be throwing rounds down range after 80 years since it was first produced. Now, the Sherman, unlike the Russ, was very standardized. If a Sherman had a certain mark, it was most often that. America was very particular of making sure that all of their shit was standardized. And while there were differences here and there and in between, they were not nearly as catastrophic as the Russ in some cases. Now, if you want to talk about catastrophic and production, look no further than the T-34 series. The T-34 is a very controversial tank, to say the least. Some claiming that it is the end-all and be-all of Soviet-Russian technology, comrade. And others saying that the age of Stalinium is over and that it is quite говноблет. But ye understand, the specific factories of the Soviet Union that produced that varied hilariously differently, with one famous factory, 183, not receiving enough steel to adequately make what they were required to do, meaning that it really was a coin toss, much like the Leman Russ. Did you have good factory made with strong stalinium? Then, good tank. Shit one made from conquered territory, shit tank. Is simple, comrade. Same thing with the Russ. So that's their history and their production. Now, you may be thinking, okay, Brad, this is the first thing you're talking about, the history and production, yet, according to this, the Leman Russ has more in common with the T-34 than it does the Sherman. Now, yeah, there's a fair argument there, mainly because of the whole design philosophy of the Imperium is heavy-duty metal, which we'll get onto later, and the Russians do love their heavy-duty stuff. But the real reason why I say that the Leman Russ is the equivalent of the Sherman is because of three main reasons, which we're going to get into right now.
There's 3 reasons? Why?
Numero uno, reliability. The Sherman, like the Russ, can operate on pig grease and hope if you needed to. The reliability of these two tanks are par excellence, especially for the Sherman. While granted it's not the uber ultra reliable as compared to modern tanks, that's a given, compared to other tanks of the time, it was incredibly solid in terms of reliability. Second, production. Sherman, cheapest chips. The Russ, cheapest chips. Easy to produce plus easy to repair equals a metric load of them, with the average Sherman costing about 50,000 here or there compared to the Tiger, which costs about 160,000 at the time. That's 3 times as much, and it shows, with well over 1,000 Tiger tanks being produced, yet well over 50,000 Shermans. Now, I don't care how grand your target tank is. A rate of 50-1, the Tiger's losing. Also, very, very similar to the good old Leman Russ. Now, I haven't found any written records of this, but I'm willing to bet my bottom dollar that a Leman Russ is 3, nay, 4 times less expensive than a Tau Hammerhead or an Eldar Fire Prism. I'll put money on that. But that's not the third reason. The third reason, and the main reason, the meat that I want to get into of this video, is the variants. The Leman Russ is notorious for having variants out the wazoo. And, while some people may love the Sherman, and some people may hate the Sherman, one thing they can agree, it was the most variant vehicle of the entire World War II period. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the beauty of the Sherman and the Leman Russ. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I will now say the following, which is going to piss several people off, but I am right and you are wrong, and I have both facts and logic to support this. In all seriousness, the Sherman was the best tank, just like how the Leman Russ is the best tank of 40k and World War II respectively.
What did he say?
Now before
So you have chosen death.
Before your pitchforks and everything, just hold up. Why do I say that?
You are gay.
Give me a chance. Let me cook. It'll be tasty. I promise. You can check out this video if you don't believe me. Cheeky wank. Cheeky wank. What the fuck? Cheeky plug. I don't know. Don't make this weird, please. Oh, good lord. I've made a bold statement, but why do I make such a statement? When you consider a tank, you need to understand its purpose in warfare. It is not 1v1 tank duels. If that was the case, the Sherman would be a medium. But that's not how it works. Wars are won by strategy and logistics, means of production. Your tank may be 100% the best thing in the world, but if you can't get it from point A to point B, it's plumb useless. Not to mention, if your tank is outnumbered 50-1, it ain't that good, because it can 1v1 one tank, it can 1v1 2 tanks, hell, it can 1v1 10 tanks. It sure as shit cannot 1v1 50 tanks. Unless they're Italian. Those are quite rubbish. And that's what I want to really get into here. The Sherman and the Russ are produced at hilariously high volumes compared to their counterparts. Like I said, I actually think it's more. I reckon that there's at least 1,000 Russes for every Hammerhead, or maybe even every Fire Prism. Granted, I don't have any numbers to back that up, but the Imperial Man is said to have 1,000 worlds. That's a lot. And even if, let's be generous, say half of those tanks are garbage, that's still 500 Russes. Let's be even more generous and say that half of those crews are not actual good crews. That's still 250 Russes. Let's be even more generous and say that another half of those crews are nowhere near the front lines. That's still 125 Russes. We'll be even more generous to the Xenos filth here and say that half of those crews are not in a combat capable condition. You're still looking at 63 Leman Russes for every 1 Fire Prism, every 1 Hammerhead. When it comes to numbers like these, my money's always going to be on the Sherman or the Russ. Now, you gotta understand, the Russ and the Sherman both are excellent tanks. They have a solid amount of armor, solid speed, solid main gun. They're all good. And again, their respective enemies, Tiger for instance, Hammerhead, Fire Prism, they cost at least 3 times as much. So if you waited for that cost, 3 Shermans against 1 Tiger? Depending on the Sherman, that's an even fight. Now, I hear you saying, but Brad, the Russ is too slow to be combat effective. The Sherman doesn't have a big enough gun to be combat effective. The standard Russ may be slow as shit. The standard Sherman may be undergunned. But this is where the true strength of it all comes in. With these tanks being so cheap and so reliable, it gives you variants. And variants, ladies and gentlemen, are the reason why I love these 2 beautiful babies.
Oh, that's a lot of people.
You need an anti-tank tank? There's the Sherman for that. And there's a Russ for that. You need an HE Demolisher Bunker Buster? There's a Sherman for that, and there is sure as shit a Leman Russ for that. You need a heavy-duty assault tank that can shrug off anti-tank rounds like it ain't shit? There's a Leman Russ for that, and there's sure as shit a jumbo-sized Sherman for that, baby. You take a look at the variants of the Sherman and Leman Russ, there's variants for everything. Not to mention, these variants worked bloody well. It is canonical that a Leman Russ, if fine-tuned, can reach 70 kilometers an hour. The solo auxiliary Leman Russ, even some Leman Russes of the modern day Imperium that are still built out to that specific spec, have more in common with a bloody Abrams than they do with Sherman. And that is really just why I adore these tanks.
I just think they're neat.
They're so versatile, and you can spec them out to do multiple things. Because what a lot of people don't understand is that if you take a cheap tank and you want to make another cheap tank, it's going to be cheap. You take an expensive tank, you want to turn that expensive tank into something else, it's going to be expensive. Why do you think you don't see any more Sturmtigers? Now granted, there is a little bit of an issue with that. In some cases, you just pick a variant of the specific tank and hammer down nail into it, and essentially make a better tank version, which is what I would do personally. But I cannot deny the effectiveness of this strategy, which is why the Americans did in fact win the war. Now you may be saying, well, if that's the case, why don't 40k win? Two reasons. Now one, if the Imperium won, the game would be over and everything would be shit.
What do you think, Antonio?
My God!
Number two, the Imperium is on America.
Fuck yeah! Coming again to save the motherfucking day, yeah!
Every single Sherman that is produced is standardized. Every single Leman Russ is the furthest thing from being standardized. Training, crew, everything. If the Imperium had the standardization of America and produced the higher quality Leman Russes, yeah, it'd be much better for them. But that's the point of the Imperium. The Imperium sucks. Grimdark. It is what it is. So with that, I hope that I have silenced the keyboard warriors, and if you are going to leave a comment, leave a nice comment, please. I am aware that the tank people can be rather verbose and very passionate about their giant, lovely metal lady boxes. So we talked about the history, we talked about the reason why the Sherman and Leman Russ are so similar, and what made them such good tanks. But now let's get into the nitty-gritty, or the specifications of each, and their various variants.
This baby can take temperatures up to 9,000 degrees.
Alrighty, the Leman Russ. So as I said, there are two main variants, the Mars Alpha pattern Leman Russ and the Riser pattern Leman Russ. To my knowledge, there is absolutely no difference between the two, or no noticeable difference, or no meaningful difference. Probably because they're made on different ForgeWorld. But the Leman Russ weighs a solid 60 tons, it has a length of 7.8 meters, a width of 4.86 meters, a height of 4.42 meters, a ground clearance of 0.45 meters. Its maximum on-road speed is a glorious 35 kilometers per hour, and its off-road speed a solid 21 kilometers per hour. Quality, good enough to drink. But as I said, the better variants can reach up to 70 kilometers per hour easy. It has several access points, including a top hatch for the commander, another top hatch for the gunner, as well as openings for the driver. It is armed with a turret-mounted battle cannon, which is a 120mm smoothbore capable of firing high-velocity anti-tank armor-piercing heat rounds. It is also armed with a hull-mounted las cannon, or a heavy bolter, or heavy flamer, or anything really. It also can be armed with two sponsing guns, heavy bolters, heavy flamers, or anything in between. Any form of crew-served weapon that the Imperial Guard has access to, it can be loaded onto a Leman Russ. It is able to traverse a full 360 degrees with its turret. It has a depression of -8 and an elevation of 22 degrees. It contains a solid 40 rounds of ammo and an additional 600 rounds of ammo for the heavy bolter, or an unlimited capacity if it's charged by a las cannon or plasma cannon, and can have about 12 solid good squirts of a flamer for each flamer. In terms of armor, it has a superstructure of 180mm, a frontal hull of 150mm, a gun mantle side and rear of 100mm, and the turret has a solid 200mm of armor on it. Now, taking a look at this, we can see that the Leman Russ has far more in common with a bloody modern battle tank than it does with anything from World War II. Though, it does have one negative that it has two negatives really, but one negative that I have to point out, it doesn't have a coax. Like, just put a coax stubber on it. I mean, you can get a pinto mounted stubber, but I think any tanker will tell you, when crunchies are swarming you, you rather shoot from inside the tank than out of it. The second thing is that the Leman Russ is hilariously tall. You notice that tanks are generally low and flat. The Leman Russ is like someone took a fucking British Mark IV tank and slapped a fucking Tiger turret on, and it was like, yeah, good enough. It is too tall. It is too tall. A common consensus that I've heard from other tankers and other tank enthusiasts is that what they would do to fix the Leman Russ is just simply squish it down. Reduce the height by about a third, make it a little longer, and it'll be grand. Now, you may be questioning the rhomboid track system, but you gotta understand, trench warfare is the norm in 40k. Period. So, yeah, it makes sense to have that. The spawn sense as well, when you're fighting giant hordes of bugs and boys, you're gonna want more guns. And aside from that, people always complain about the Russ being broken, being dumb, being sued, but you look at the specs, it's like, no, it's pretty solid. But its best feature, in my opinion, and the one I saved the last, is its engine. It is armed with an HL230 V12 multi-fuel engine. It is canonical that the Leman Russ can run on Amasec, bloody whiskey-powered tank. Lord save me, I can feel the America rising.
Fuck yeah! Freedom is the only way, yeah!
You guys don't understand how important and how good that is. One of the biggest factors that stopped Germany from progressing in World War II, one of the many, I should say, was its severe lack of fuel. German armor on several counts has notoriously been starved of any type of fuel whatsoever. I can guarantee you rocked up to a German tank commander and be like, yo, jawohl, Kameraden, Sie kann power the Panzer with ein Bier. You get the biggest stiffy you ever seen in your life, goddamn, I'll tell you what. The Leman Russ is a quality vehicle and significantly better than people give it credit for. Now, on to the other variants. We have the Leman Russ Conqueror. The Leman Russ Conqueror is armed with the Conqueror cannon. Essentially, it is a smaller version of a rapid-fire battle cannon, except even more rapid battle fire. We then have the Demolisher. It is armed with a Demolisher cannon, which is a giant fucking howitzer. You need that concrete bunker gone? Demolisher. The Leman Russ Executioner. Plasma, because why blow up one individual guardsman when we can blow up a whole tank? The Vanquisher. Anti-tank. The Vanquisher is armed with a Vanquisher cannon, which in some sources it depends. Some people say it just has a longer barreled gun and fires better ammunition, but some sources say it's actually a 150mm gun. I would go with the long barreled 150mm personally, just makes more sense to me. But if you guys have anything concrete, let me know down in the comments below. We then have the Leman Russ Annihilator. The Annihilator is armed with double las cannons. You want a las cannon tank? Here you go. Here's 5 las cannons on your tank. We then have the Leman Russ Exterminator. The Exterminator is armed with twin-linked autocannons. You hate infantry? This thing will sort it out. We then have the Leman Russ Punisher. The Leman Russ Punisher is armed with a Punisher cannon. You hate infantry even more? Have a chunky Gatling cannon on your boy. And then we come to the Leman Russ Eradicator. The Leman Russ Eradicator is armed with an Eradicator cannon. So, whereas the Demolisher is a type of a bombard, this is more of a proper howitzer. Has better elevation, can fire longer range, got better shells, just a little bit more difficult to produce. Another unconfirmed yet popular variant of the Leman Russ is the up-armored Leman Russ. Essentially, this is a Leman Russ with double the armor of a standard Leman Russ bolted onto it. It is also twice as slow because of said armor, but significantly more durable. And I gotta mention it, you get looted Leman Russ. Whatever the fuck the orcs do with it. It's funny, it's quality, do not ask me to cover it. I have a certain level of sanity that I try to maintain. As I mentioned before, we have the Leman Russ Incinerator as well as the solar pattern Leman Russ. These Alpha Chad level Leman Russes that are significantly more powerful, significantly more armor, significantly more speed, the best of the best. If you need something, there's a Leman Russ for it. And these are the only confirmed variants of the Leman Russ. Now, normally when we talk about History Hammer and sci-fi is often crazier than IRL life, usually speaking. This, however, is not one of those cases. Because if you think that the Leman Russ had a lot of variants, sweet Mary Mother of God, hold on to your hindquarters, boyo, because right now we're going to be talking about the Sherman. The Sherman weighed a grand total of 30 to 38 tons depending on the certain variant that you took. Length 5.84 meters to 6.27 meters, again depending on the variant. A width of 2.62 meters, up to 3 meters depending on variant, and a height of 2.74 meters to 2.9 meters depending on the variant. It had approximately 60 to 105 millimeters of frontal armor depending on the variant. The standard variant was armed with a 75mm M3 gun, as well as a solid 50 caliber Browning machine gun, 130 caliber coaxial mounted machine gun, and 130 caliber bow mounted machine gun. And this fella could go at a solid 48 kilometers an hour on road and a solid 32 off-road. It was a very speedy little fella. Now you see, the Sherman has so many variants. Enough variants that it would probably kill somebody. And I'm not talking about other variants used with the chassis. I'm talking about straight up Sherman tanks that had shit bolted onto it. And these range from everything in between to rocket artillery Sherman, who had a giant rocket battery strapped on top of the turret, to flame tank Sherman. You like flamethrowers? Flamethrowers. To the 105mm howitzer Sherman. It was a regular Sherman except that it had 105mm howitzer strapped onto it. You then got the 76mm Sherman, which was a high velocity 76mm cannon that was significantly more punchy than the standard variant of the Sherman. Side note, the reason why that this tank wasn't particularly deployed in mass numbers or replaced was because two reasons. The tank crews actually preferred the 75mm and requested it. Why did they request it, you may be asking? Because, as I mentioned, there were 50,000 Shermans to 1,000 tanks of the Tiger, about 1,300 actually, meaning that the vast majority of combat the Shermans faced were against either other armored German vehicles other than tanks, or infantry in fortified positions, and a solid chunk of HE is far more potent than an armor-piercing cannon round. And the 75mm M3 gun had a significantly better armor-piercing variant. Side note over, let's continue. We then have the engineering tanks, such as tanks armed with dozers, as well as the Duzit, which was a mobile assault bridge, which is a bloody Sherman with a bridge strapped to it. We then have the Aunt Jemima, which was a mine roller, or an infantry roller, depending on who you want to ask. I don't know why this isn't in 40k, the god would love this. We then have recovery vehicles. It's a Sherman, but it's meant to pick up other tanks. And that's not even to mention that the other variants that we have, the main variants of the Sherman, that being the M4A1, A2, A3, A4, etc., change the engine specifically rather than the main gun. Whereas in the Leman Russ, it's the main gun that gets changed. These engines differ from various things to things. Some are better, some are worse, some are just made by a different company. Now, I haven't even touched on Hobart's Funnies. Hobart's Funnies are collectively known as the 79th Armored Division of the Royal Engineers. It was a British armored division that were created by adding several different modifications to tanks, such as an amphibious modification to the tank, as well as every other thing in between. Seriously, look this up. It's incredible what they did with this thing. But what I want to get into are the two main variants of the Sherman that fix the two biggest problems and the two biggest complaints of said Sherman. That being the Sherman Firefly and the Sherman Jumbo. The Sherman Firefly is a direct translation to the Vanquisher of the Leman Russ. It is armed with a 17-pounder heavy-duty high-velocity anti-tank British gun. Now, the Sherman Firefly was severely effective at its job. This heavy-duty cannon could threaten every single type of German tank. Yep, even that big old chunky Tiger II would do a double take when it saw one of these Fireflies pull up. So much so that the Firefly tank crews had to actually use camouflage to camouflage their barrels. If not, they'd become a prime target of the German opponent. Now, the Firefly was exclusive to the British because it was a British gun. Now, there are only two main downsides to the Firefly. One, you can argue, that's that it removed the bow gun, and the second was that the turret was very, very cramped because of this. According from reports from troops, they seemed to love the tank despite this, probably because it was just really good at its job. And then we have the Sherman Jumbo. The Sherman Jumbo was an assault tank. Essentially, an assault tank was a medium tank with the armor of a heavy, but the firepower of a medium. This chunky fella had a solid 105mm of frontal armor protection, as well as increased frontal turret protection, though it was lacking a little bit in the sides and the rear, but when the main thing you're getting hit at is the front, that's all that matters. With a combat report detailing that the German 75mm anti-tank gun, aka the Puck 7.5, impacting a Sherman Jumbo, and while it did damage the outer steel plating, the actual tank itself was completely unharmed and completely impervious to it, and it didn't just get hit once, it got hit a couple times. As I said, the Sherman Jumbo is a direct counterpart to the up-armored version of the Leman Russ. Very slow, very chunky, very good, and my personal favorite. I like me some heavy tanks, what can I say? Now, this is just a little touch-up on these two beautiful machines. As we can see, there are variants out to the wazoo. For whatever you need, there's a Sherman and a Leman Russ for that. And these worked very well. So then, if these tanks worked really well, why do people think the Sherman and Leman Russ were just utter shit?
Am I a joke to you?
So, the Sherman and Leman Russ both suffer from the myth that they were both quite rubbish. Now, the reason why this myth happens is because you're taking a look at the Leman Russ and the Sherman in the 1v1 context. The Sherman versus the Tiger, or the Hammerhead versus the Leman Russ, those two fellas are getting their asses kicked in 9 times out of 10. But as I said before, it's not just one Sherman, nor is it not just one Leman Russ. It is several that are fighting it. Not to mention that the standard version of the Sherman or the Leman Russ could in fact take on a Tiger or a Hammerhead depending on the skill of the crew. Most people love to believe that the Sherman and the Leman Russ stand no chance. That's not true. They stand a chance. May not be a good chance, but it is a chance. And when you combine that you're facing at least 3 to 4 extra Shermans and Leman Russes, that small chance goes up by a fair chunk. For the case of the Sherman, it was everywhere. It had variants for whatever you needed, and it had a lot more, meaning that in any straight up war scenario in which attrition is the name, the Sherman wins. And the Sherman is quite good at what it does. The crews loved the Sherman. It was used by everyone. Whether it be the Sherman Jumbo, the Firefly, one of the crazy from Hobart's funnies, or anything in between, crews loved them. And they were quite good at what they did. Now granted, you do have cases of Tigers absolutely wrecking Shermans. Several at a time even. Now a lot of this is just due to the Sherman being used incorrectly. A perfect example of this is the Battle of the Kasserine Pass during the Tunisian campaign of World War II in 1943. So, the 18th to the 24th of February 1943 of the German Reich. There was UK and Free Front's troops supporting the US, as well as Italian troops supporting the Germans, but primarily we're looking at Americans and Germans doing the fighting here. The Americans decided to advance full force in a flying V formation, straight up in the pass, and walked directly into an access trap where they were caught in a two-sided ambush. It was utter devastation, with the total casualties being a grand total of 3,300 killed, 3,000 prisoners of war, 183 tanks lost, 616 vehicles lost, including 208 guns lost, for a grand total of nearly 10,000 casualties worth of people, compared to the Germans, who lost about 1,000 casualties and only about 20 tanks, a kill ratio of 10 to 1. Not to mention that the Allies outnumbered the Germans by a solid 8,000 men. The Sherman is a tool. It's not something like the Tiger, where it is just significantly better that it can brute force its way. You have to use it correctly. And we see that when the Sherman is in fact indeed used correctly, such as the later years, especially on the Western Front, once American tankers learned how to deal with those chunky cats of the German Empire, they dealt with them rather quickly. The problem with the Tiger and the Panther and these big German tanks was that one, there wasn't enough of them, and that two, they were not that reliable. They guzzled fuel, which the Germans didn't have, and they broke down a lot and were hard to be repaired. And as skilled as the German tankers were, you can only be in one place at one time. So you may be taking out 3 or 4 Shermans at your front, but you ain't gonna see the 3 sneaking up on your rear. It's the sad reality of it. This is my own personal opinion. I feel that Germany should have stopped at the Panther, even though technically they went to the Tiger and then went back to the Panther. But they should have stopped at the Panther. Focus on making it more reliable, use better fuel consumption, and I think they would have had a much better chance. But then again, we're getting into a bit more speculation here. Now, on to the good old Leman Russ. The Leman Russ is different from the Sherman in the fact that the Leman Russ is the chunkiest tank in all of 40k. The two main competitors of the Leman Russ, that being the Tau Hammerhead and the Eldari Fire Prism, are faster and have better guns. But in terms of actual armor protection, they're quite paper thin. There have been several accounts of a Leman Russ main battle tank smashing through hammerheads and fire prisms like they were made of absolutely nothing. If a Leman Russ company can get the drop on the Tau or the Eldari, which is a lot easier for the Tau than it is for the Eldari, I'll give you that, but if they can catch them in an ambush, they're destroying them wholesale. People don't seem to understand, 200 millimeters of armor is chunky, my guy.
Look at this chunk.
And it's a lot more durable than people give it credit for. Not to mention you get the up-armored versions, which are even more durable, and funny quirk. For those of you who don't know, the Leman Russ is supposed to be made with a shield projector. Now this is from an old school Tau codex, but it turns out that the Leman Russ is built to house and carry a shield projector. And it turns out that in some cases, that's actually why it's so tall, to accommodate for that shield projector. Now as to why, well, simple reason, the Mechanicus doesn't know it's there, and nor does the Mechanicum have the tech to make it, or it's just too expensive, or they did it to cut down the cost. But if you imagine giving a Leman Russ, right, a shield projector. Suddenly, that funny tank that everyone hates ain't that funny anymore, and it's a lot more menacing. The main strength of the Leman Russ is that how much it can be changed and manipulated. I keep on harping on the Solar Auxilia variant because the Solar Auxilia is the best. Video about them coming out at 10k special, like and sub, hey. Because the Solar pattern is essentially a Leman Russ with a better gun, more armor, more protection, and in some cases, who knows, maybe even a shield projector. That Leman Russ is devastating and would absolutely be the best tank, period. I stand by it. A Solar pattern Leman Russ with a shield projector would completely fuck up an Eldari Fire Prism or a Tau Hammerhead or whatever the hell the orcs can throw together. Necrons, maybe. I don't know that much about Necron tech, to be honest. Necron tech is kind of fucky. Now, you see, the main drawback of the Leman Russ is the Imperium itself. The standardization is non-existent. If the Leman Russ was produced by a force that was able to standardize its system, that was heavily industrialized, that was heavily centralized, that produced good quality units, with excellent training, manufacturing, and the best logistics possible, it would absolutely dominate. Ultramar is the best. You know I'm right. And with that lovely blueberry sucking, let's wrap up.
Speaking of crimes against humanity.
So, the Leman Russ and the Sherman tank. Very similar, yet very different. But in the end, they both serve the same purpose. They are the workhorses of their respective units. They are cheap, easy, reliable, with variants out the wazoo, and if crewed correctly, if upgraded correctly, they are the best tanks, period. Not to mention, they look cool. Look at this solar pattern in Leman Russ Incinerator. It is my favorite version. It's so bloody quality. And look at these Sherman variants. The Firefly looks so bloody sexy with that gun. And the Jumbo, oh baby, the Jumbo's a chunky fella. Look at that. But more importantly, these tanks allow their respective units to cope. At the end of the day, when you're up against quality, you gotta make something of better quality, or you gotta make something of quantity. And while eventually America did make something of better quality, that being the Pershing and the Super Pershing, that only came when the war was basically over, and they were pretty much obsolete at that time. It was the good old Sherman that chugged through. It was the Sherman that did what needed to be done. And for the Leman Russ, the only thing holding it back is not the actual unit itself, rather it's the faction in which it resides from. Like everything in the Imperium is its own worst enemy. If the Imperium gets its shit together and they figure out how to actually make this shit how it was supposed to be made, the Imperium would be a very, very different place. But then again, that's the grimdark of 40k, and that's why the real world is so much better than 40k. Because as much as you may love 40k, you would never want to live there in 40k. Even Ultramar. Ultramar's great. Ultramar's like today. But in Ultramar, you have a chance of a demon appearing in front of you and proceeding to use you as a fleshlight. No, I'm not joking. Yes, that is a Slaanesh demon. So, in conclusion, whether you're a seasoned colonel of the Astral Tarum or an American general on your march towards Berlin, there is a Leman Russ and most definitely a Sherman that has exactly what you need. And the next time you think about the good old Leman Russ and the Sherman and you think, that's kind of shit, just remember, they got the job done and they look cool while doing it. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, everyone. Make sure that you guys liked it. Little bit different. We're changing the orientation of History Hammer a little bit. Instead of having a set type of thing where we go through. Last time we did the 5 reasons. This time we're doing something a little different. Let me know what you guys think, which one you prefer, or do you just want me to do whatever I feel like. We are now at 8,000 subscribers. Bloody hell, this is up and up and up. This is crazy. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It means the absolute world to me that you guys are just here. You guys are wonderful and beautiful, and just I am so happy to have this beautiful community. Speaking of community, join the Discord. You get access to some awesome stuff and you get to talk to me. But if you want even more stuff, then you can sign up for all of our lovely jubbly memberships and Patreon, in which case I give you some behind the scenes access and you give me that sweet dollar dinero, baby. We have live streams. We stream approximately 2 to 3 times a week, every Tuesday, Saturday, and Thursday. The schedules will be posted on every Monday. Check out the Infinity tab. Right now we're doing Bolt Gun as well as Factorial ForgeWorld, where the goal is to make a Titan and purge the heretics, as always in all 40k. As always, I am a VA, so if you need any VA work, hit me down below and all the things that you need. Or if you want to collab on anything, hell, let me know. Well, I'm always here for you, baby. And as always, a massive, wonderful thank you to my amazing channel members. And to the private tier, we have good old Cheesy Taran, and we have the Gaming Storyteller. Hi, Dutch. Then the corporate tier, we have Newman, Rudiger, Arcturus 960, G2, Afariu Sex, Mr. August 14th, Chris, Efren Zaramo, Serious Business, and Mamasu Konpaku. As always, the most heartfelt and sincere thank you for supporting this channel and enabling me to do more. It means the world to me, and you guys are helping me live out a dream. I love you all so much. Join the Discord so I can give you a big old kiss. Other than that, make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that wonderful YouTube stuff. But I have been General Bradley 101. You have been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Thank you oh so very much for watching. Make sure to stay loyal out there, boys and gals. And I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers! I am just waiting for all of the tank nerds to grind in the comments and break their fingers on the keyboards telling me how I'm wrong. Like, my brother in Christ, everything I said is backed up by sources. Like, I didn't say anything crazy. And no, my Sherman is not my favorite tank. That would be the Churchill. Like I said, I like my heavy tanks.